Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Voxcaster. I'm your host Dan. On today's episode, I'm bringing Bryan, Keir, and Justin on, and we're going to give our thoughts on where we see the state of the game as is as a whole. Thanks for joining me, guys.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So, stuff that we'll be going through this episode more or less would be like, now that we've got more games and now that we're back in the yellow phase, we're finally be able to kind of play a bit more and kind of see it as a whole. So, we're going to be talking about some of our games. How do we see certain matchups? Are they all like one-sided? Because like at the end of 8, it was kind of like if you played one faction, you were either winning or you were losing. There was no in between. We're also going to be talking about how are we enjoying secondaries. I know a lot of people played ITC back in 7th and 8th edition and stuff like that. And obviously the ones that GW have done are much different, but also very fun to play. And yeah, we're just going to go on, talk about stuff like that, and just give our input on where we see it is. Might not be a super long episode, but I'm sure a lot of people that might not be getting a lot of games in would like to hear stuff like this. So when they finally get the games in, they'll know what they can expect going into it. So pretty much on this episode, I know Bryan and myself haven't gotten as many games as you, Keir, and Justin. So you guys are probably doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but myself and Bryan has been following a lot of the stuff online, this and that, seeing people posting some tournaments. So we might even talk stuff like that, seeing like, hey, this army that you never would have thought won a GT, won a GT. And we'll kind of give our thoughts on how we see that's going to roll out later on as time goes on. So starting off, we'll start with yourself, Keir. Now that you've got many games under your belt, especially lately you've been testing out your Death Guard and stuff like that, as a whole, how are you finding Ninth Edition kind of faring out as, like I said, just game-wise, play style, like everything in general?
Well, the biggest change I would see is 8th really felt, as you said, about playing the right factions, playing the strong factions. A lot of the game had a huge emphasis on killing first and everything else second. I think 9th, they found a much better balance where I think the most rewarding thing is practicing one list, getting familiar with it, and getting experience with the game more so than, running an Imperial Fist list with, triple Thunderfire cannons and 3 Relic Scorpiuses, right? Like, there's so much more to playing the mission. There's so many more options. You can play a game where you don't even have any pressure to kill any units. And I mean, we just saw, talking about tournaments that happened, we just saw Elder win a GT. And his list basically just looked like a bunch of MSUs where no matter what, if you're trying to kill this, you're not trading well, period. Then we saw John Lennon take another GT with Tyranids. And, again, these are subpar factions as per, the recent toll on, like, faction tiers. But great players who know the game well and know the army well. And I think that's important. I don't think you would have seen, F tier or C tier or whatever armies win GTs in 8th just because most of the time, kill more was a huge part of the secondaries, and then also the secondaries themselves, like Big Game Hunter, where you had to kill units, and this one where you killed units, and you just found a lot of games by the start of turn 3. You could pretty much figure out the outcome, which to me seems stale. I mean, 9th now you should play the games through. There's definitely armies that have like an end game like Death Guard versus armies that have to basically just score as many early like Orcs. Like Orcs, for example, you're probably going to get tabled almost every game. So it's like turns 1 to 3, you got to just go all out.
You got to maximize as much as you can right off the get-go.
And then there's armies that fall all in between those sort of parameters. But I just think they successfully made an edition where experience and practice are more important than anything else. And to me, I would say that's a success because no one wants to not play the faction they love because it's just bad. You know what I mean?
And I get what you mean. It's like, unless if you don't have a list that had a huge amount of firepower back in 8th, it's like, why play it? Like, you weren't going to get a whole lot done. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. It's like, you can have such a versatile list that would have made no sense in 8th, but because you can play to the mission, and I'll probably say that 10 times, is that is the most important part to ninth edition is play the mission. Like you said, you can be getting your ass handed to you early in the game, but if you can pick it up and score those different ones at the end of it, you can come out of ahead with 2 models left on the board.
Or even when you got none left and you just won it from the early game because you played the objective.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so just talking about ninth so far, if there are people who played eighth and haven't really had a chance to play ninth because of things going on in the world and such, I would say that's the biggest thing is just write a list, familiarize yourself with the missions and the secondaries, and just think about how your list plays into different styles of armies in each of these missions. And the more you can nail down a game plan, because even with the same list, choosing secondaries in one mission versus another can be a huge difference. Like there's some missions where you have to hold 2, hold 3, hold more, and there's only 5 objectives versus like some missions where you only have to hold 1 and 2 and more, and you can just sit in your deployment zone and get 40 points on victory. Primary. Yeah. So I would say, anyone looking to get into ninth right now, like I think that's where you should start and make a list that can play these secondaries and these different missions and go from there, and not just look at, data sheets and gunpowder, because there's so much more depth to the game now than I think there was in eighth.
Definitely. Nope, I completely agree with you 100%. And I have a feeling we'll have Justin come up next, and I'm going to say you're probably going to be saying a lot of the same things. But so, what's your take on your games? Because you've also had a lot of games in the last little bit.
Yeah, no, Keir pretty much hits it right on the head. Like I picked my list, and so far, it's not done good. Versus most of the people, like I think I lost against the same person 7 times in a row, and I finally got my win on the 8th. But for me, it's learning my list. Like you can't play the gun line anymore, and I used to play Tau, and then I went to Iron Hands, which was which is a cast link. So my problem is I don't take early board. So when I played Bryan, I pretty much tabled him, but like he said, he scored so many points at the beginning of the game where I couldn't catch up to him.
And he took the victory just from Marine.
I forced you into Space Marine habit of castling in your deployment for 5 turns.
Well, and that was just another thing about secondaries. I chose a poor secondaries, engage on all fronts, and I scored 0 points, where if I would have picked Assassinate, I could have got 15.
And that would have won the game.
Yeah, which would have won me the game. And another thing I want to emphasize is you want to go all 5 rounds, because every game I played, we didn't know who was winning until we tallied up the last little bit of points, and most of my games have been 2 to 3 points difference in, I'm going to say, 7 out of my games.
No, it's true. Like I find ninth edition, it's like, of course you're gonna have like the one odd blowout game here and there. That's inevitable, no matter where you're playing, what edition, this and that. But like you're saying, like I've probably had my most close come games in ninth edition. Like you said, it's literally last of turn 5. You're like, I need to like nickel 2 points here somewhere to like take this, and it's not even like by killing something. It's just like, okay, well, where can I move my guy to position him properly? And I think that's huge too, because I think during the last FAQ, if you are second and you are going last, you get to do your primaries at the end of the turn rather than the beginning to give you guys like that little extra chance. Because before, it's like going into the 5th, if you had nothing, then you weren't scoring anything at all. At least here, it's giving you that last chance to kind of be like, where can I get those 2 points? Where can I get those 3 points? Just because it's that close.
Yeah, they've bridged the gap between going first and second for sure with that FAQ.
Yeah, because I feel going second gives a huge benefit now, better than going first, because it gives you the opportunity to clear units off of an objective to score your 15 on primaries on last turn.
Okay, I'm going to agree with you all the way up until AdMech. And AdMech, you always want to go first, because it's the difference between you making a charge on your second turn and being shot for 2 turns or shot for 1 turn. So that's the only army where I will say I always want to go first against them.
And we're all holding a sign that says, Nick Steves, we're looking at you.
Yeah, if not for anything else, and just
I've
being able
never.
to reposition my units, like
Mm-hmm.
move them into better places, right? Yeah, Justin. I mean, like you were saying, a lot of it is picking the right secondaries, and don't just listen to the internet and pick engage and deploy scramblers every game, because you're going to play armies and against lists and on maps where those aren't good
No, they're not
choices.
going to be viable.
And if you're like, with Iron Hand and Death Guard, demons, there's a lot of armies that are way faster than you. So I think there's definitely, in that case, you might be better off picking secondaries where you don't have to branch out as far. Like my game just now, I picked Psychic Ritual just because I didn't want to have to commit to 4/4 of the board, and I just don't have the units or the speed to do that. And
That's playing Death Guard, right?
yep, that's Death Guard.
No, and it's true, and that's the big important part is when you're learning your lists, I would strongly recommend have the rule book, and this is on the time that you're not playing, but study your secondaries. Study what each individual one does, and even if you made yourself a little chart, if you're bored one night and you're like, okay, with my army, my list, my play style, what secondaries are going to work best against which armies? And this is good to have ahead of time. So if you're at a local game club, or more importantly at a tournament, obviously there's going to be people there you've never played with, or actually some armies you've never played against. So it's always good to have that little bit of information going into something like that, being like, all right, so I'm playing like in Keir's instant Death Guard. You show up and holy crap, okay, I'm playing a Salamanders player. What are going to be some secondaries that are good against Space Marines as a whole, but maybe more like against Salamanders? And then so your next game is Tyranids. What's going to be some secondaries that are going to be good against Tyranids? You kind of assess the list, you kind of being like, okay, what can I do that's going to be able to deal with what I'm playing right now? So obviously in this edition, it's do your study, do your time, learn your list, look at your secondaries, and like really dive into it and give yourself the information you need going into games. Because I'm honestly guilty of it myself. Like I've gone to many games and I'm just like, whatever, I'll choose this secondary just because it seems like it could be good against them. But then you start reading the little details and you're starting to play, and then you're actually on the board playing against them, and you're like, yeah, no, I screwed up pretty hard right here. And it's like Justin said, playing against Bryan. He
My
chose
demon speed, I'm all over him, and he chose a secondary that
it,
required him to move out. So as
exactly.
long
So
as I
like,
kept feeding stuff to him, he wasn't going anywhere.
yeah. So by turn two, I'm sure he realized that he already screwed up and he lost 15 points. And like you said, that will lose you the game. So I strongly recommend, if you have a sec, go through your secondaries, go through the secondaries that are actually coming out in the codexes, because each codex now, as they're coming out, will have, I think it's like 3 or 4 faction specific ones. They're not always going to be the greatest, but against certain armies,
Well,
they will be good. So,
the Necron one and the Space Marine one are pretty cool.
Yeah, certain armies and certain missions.
yeah.
You have to, the difference between Dawn of War and Hammer of Anvil versus a fast army. Well, like I think there's two archetypes. There's like a horde army, then there's elite army, and then there's speed. It's either fast or slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like, it could be slow horde, could be fast elite, like White Scars, for example. And yeah, you just have to look. I think going in addition to what you're saying is like, look at each mission. Imagine yourself actually playing that mission with the list you've put together, and against these different archetypes. And it's like, do I realistically think that this army is going to let me walk into this table quarter? Am I actually going to be able to stay there? Can I even get there? Are there secondaries where I can just sit in my deployment zone and get 10 points rather than risking 0 to 15 on something that's not so reliable, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and I think a big part of it too, there's mission secondaries that are worth looking at too, and some of them are fantastic and you should always take, and some of them are absolute garbage.
Yeah.
But again, just the more like, even if you just categorize it like that, like against this type of army, I think these secondaries will be good. In this type of army, I think these type secondaries will be good. And then educating yourself. I mean, even if you've never played against NIDS, it's they're basically a fast 40 army, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna want to
Surprising
play.
amount of shots.
Right, but I'm just generalizing. Like,
Yeah.
if you've never played against an army, like, so you brought the Salamanders example up, and I would say they're just like an average moving army, and they're pretty resilient. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so what can I do against that? Maybe I have the same speed as them, and I can get out there. Maybe my list is geared towards close combat, and if I get into combat with them, I'm going to win that most of the time. So maybe I can, try something.
No, and definitely like it's definitely in a nutshell what it is. And like you said, Keir, and like what I was preaching a while ago is yeah, like take the second, take a night, study your stuff, and it will bring you a long ways. It will make you be able to look at the game as a whole and not blank as much. Because there's nothing worse. Because I've blanked so many times being like, and like this is even going to like your stratagems. Learn your stratagems because like I'll be there looking at my cards, looking at combos. I'm like, so how do I do this? Am I using this at the right time? Like make yourself a cheat sheet. Like I have
Yeah.
an actual cheat sheet where it's like movement phase, attack or like shooting, psychic, and in each category I'll write down which units, which stratagems, which combos. So it's taking like a pressure off, and then after you're playing it so many
Yeah.
times, you're not going to need it because you're going to be using it so much. It's repetition. You'll know what it is.
I've personally done it at ninth. I'm sure Justin's had games like this. Well, you just mentioned having one against Bryan Siemens, where there is no worse feeling than getting to like the start of turn 3 and realizing that there's a secondary where you're probably going to score 0 points on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is just an uphill battle and it's rough and it's probably enough to make you automatically lose the game. And really, by taking those extra steps, if you have the time and can conceptualize these games out in your mind, I definitely could have avoided it. Just thinking about some of the armies I was playing and what their sort of general angle is. I took Engage on all fronts against Marc Antoine, and he runs a Thousand Suns Demon Space Marine or Chaos Space Marine list. So he has 20 Noise Marines running up the board that can still shoot. He has 3 Sorcerers, one of which is the Lord of Change, basically flying around and psyching. And then he just has like Nurglings and stuff. And I took Engage, and then I got I got 2 rounds in or something. I'm just like, I can't take board presence from this guy. If I come out and try to do anything, he's going to just dump a boatload of mortal wounds on me. This
Mm-hmm.
was a terrible secondary, and there's some things you can't predict.
No.
But like you said, you can definitely educate yourself as best as possible so you can avoid that disappointment because it sucks when it happens. Like it's almost to the point where you're just like,
it's discouraging. But again, at the end of the day, is when you're getting these games in, that's when you're learning those mistakes to prep you for a tournament or something like that. So like getting games in, studying, like it all comes all around at the end of it. Because like you said, it's like, all right, well you've had the situation where you got cornered. So now next time you play him, you'll learn from your mistake and you'll actually know what to do next time. You'll know not to take the secondary, experiment with another one. And that's why it's a lot of fun, like playing against the same people over and over. Like Justin was saying, he played against the same guy 8 times. It took him 8 times to get his first win. But I'm sure every time he played, he learned something new, like what units that he had that could work better against these units, or what movement that would work better to stay away from certain other units, who to avoid, who to engage. And this is stuff that you get by playing your army list over and over and over.
Yeah.
Or generalized changes. Like I noticed one of the units that I thought was going to be really good, and I put in my list. It just wasn't working out. So it's just like, okay, if I add this unit instead, my list kind of stayed the same. I just changed one unit, and now it's performing.
Yeah, you
a lot
dropped some
better.
blade guards, didn't you?
Yeah, I dropped a unit of 5 blade guards for another Redemptor or Contemptor. No, Redemptor Dreadnought
Yeah.
with the plasma, and it just adds.
No, I was going to
added
say, and the
what I
funny
was.
part that is, and like Blade Guard, everybody's running Space Marines or playing Blade Guard because you look at the data sheets and they're like, they are beasts. Don't get me wrong, they are beasts, but they're not going to work in every single build and every single thing. So, like you're saying, it's okay to take these big meta, if you want to call it that, units that everybody is using and just put them to the side for a game. Try something new like Justin did, and like you'll realize, like, huh, the unit is good. Don't get me wrong, but maybe for not how you're playing it. So,
Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning that even though armies are supposed to act certain ways according to the internet, and I said this about secondaries, don't just listen to the internet. To me, playstyle is definitely a thing, and
Yep.
even though people will latch on to certain units and stuff, if they don't, just because they aren't working for you, it doesn't mean you're bad. It just means that the way you play your list doesn't necessarily leverage anything off of having that unit.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I've had personal experience where I've tried those meta units and they didn't work out, and then I ditched them for a game or two. And then when I put them back in, I started when I played those games without it and then brought them back in, I started realizing, the other side of it, where you can just not be using a unit to its maximum advantage, and sometimes just not having it in your list. Sometimes you realize the absence of it more than you might have thought. I think that's kind of makes sense. Like,
It's like you're saying, it's because like they're on the board, you're using them, but you might be not using it to its full potential. And so, like you said, so when you take them out, then you'll see in that game, it's like, what did I lack? Was what I lacked that unit that I was not using properly? Yeah.
Maybe there's a better way to use it, and maybe you don't see that until you don't have them in your list,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start sitting there thinking, man, if I had that unit right now, I could do this. And then, so sometimes, and there's all sorts of causes to that, being overly aggressive with units or thinking they're more melee when really they're there's all kinds of things that could happen. But, don't be afraid to shake it up. Don't just listen to the internet, and don't be afraid to say, that unit doesn't fit my playstyle. I mean, the internet loves Plague Burst crawlers, and I'm starting to come to the conclusion that the only reason that is because people roll way more sixes than I do. You know what I mean? So it's definitely, I haven't tried a game without them yet, but it's definitely in my near future. And I'm hoping that after playing a game or two without them, I'll start to realize, what they were actually bringing to my list that feels like it's missing. Even if it's just a big chunky unit that people are shooting at instead of my Death Shroud, like that's still valuable. You know what I mean? So
Exactly, because the Plague Burst Crawler is definitely good to take hits. But I've been seeing a lot of lists now, like you said, like they are running none. They're running a bunch of MSU, just basic Plague Marines. They're running large blobs of Terminators because it's pushing out almost just as much firepower. They might die a little bit easier, and they are actually a lot more point costed. But again, for their play style, if they can take the board control with it, hit their secondaries with those units where they wouldn't have been able to with the Plague Burst Crawler, that's another thing to look at too.
I think specifically to Death Guard, there is definitely a justification to running as many bubonic Astartes infantry units as possible.
Oh, it's rubbing off.
That's what they're called.
Butok.
Butok, that's what you said. But anyway, bubonic Astartes, because they have a secondary that's specifically exclusive to that type of unit. But yeah, exactly. I mean, I could see going back to the Blade Guard example, you put them on the board and you want them to like get in combat and swing because they do a ton of damage and stuff. But maybe their best use is just to stand there on an objective and be super annoying to move. Like, and it's all until you try it, put it in and take it out.
That walks in and wipes a squad of Blade Guards, and you're like, huh.
I would never base a decision off of that because that sounds like a statistical anomaly. Get out of here.
It's like me. It's like me saying when Marc Antoine ran his 10 Terminators into my captain and he lived and killed he killed the whole unit technically. Yeah. It's just like theoretically
that should not
he should have died. No,
exactly.
It shouldn't have happened. I rolled really hot, but it
I was running.
Take that into consideration.
No, for sure. Yeah, you have to realize sometimes it's just like, okay, there was a 3% chance of that happening. And I actually, when Nick was playing the Death Guard, he ran Morty against my 60 possessed list, and I did 99 attacks on Morty. They were hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s with vets, and it was 99 attacks. And they had an Exalted Champion, so they were rerolling all wounds. And out of 99 attacks on Morty, I didn't even bracket him.
Oh, Jesus.
And then I asked someone who's much better at math to show me the probability, and it was 3% chance that result would happen. And so that's not, sometimes, again, there's definitely an aspect of being able to say to yourself, like, okay, that was not normal, and I should not make decisions based off that.
It's a dice game. It's going to go one way or the other. And that's the thing I hate about a dice game is when you get that false sense of hope when you roll so hot. You're like, this is going to work every time. Then you do it again, and you're like, why isn't it not doing what it did last time? And then it's because you're not rolling as good. And
I will say this, and I feel like Justin might agree, that it is less of a dice game in 9th and 8th.
It is. especially for point scoring.
Yes.
Oh no, definitely. Like I definitely agree with you there. But I just meant like a dice game as far as like what you think a unit could do as far as damage output or something like that. Is what I meant.
Yeah, we're talking about 9 so far, so I just felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't say that because you can definitely play 9th edition with better odds, I guess. Like it seems like you can play the game a lot less risky and sitting there thinking like, oh, this unit has to kill whatever. Yeah. Like that's so much more 8th than 9th, and I think that's one of the better changes too. Is the curve that shitty dice rolls has isn't as impactful. I find, anyways.
No, definitely, and I definitely agree with you there because, like I said, this is more of a tactical addition, where if you know what you want to do and if you can take proper board control and you can have your units in the proper places, will win you a game over killing 20, 30 guys.
Yeah. Well, the movement phase literally can win you the game.
Mm-hmm.
Certain situations.
Yeah.
Like, for example, is like if you know how to move your army and how your opponent army works. For example, is like a fast army against Death Guard or against me. Since we're really slow to take the board, they could just run up really cheap units and set them an inch in front of us, and then bam, we lost the whole movement phase.
Yep.
And we're already slow, so you just made our game a lot harder by putting a unit there. You don't even have to shoot them; they just sit there.
Yeah, and that a person doing that is really not losing much. Like you said, you throw a little unit's worth 50 points. Like, say for example, playing Dark Eldar, like we're fast as all hell.
Yeah.
Throw Furies for demons, but like a 5-man witch cult, a 5-man warriors unit. Throw them in front of it. If they die, whoop-de-doo, I just lost 50 points, but I also lost half your army from moving up the board and catching up to me.
Yep, and people are bringing them to do exactly that. So it's not that they're losing nothing; they're literally losing nothing. That unit has done exactly what it wants it to do. And echoing off of the movement, I think in 8th you could get away with not knowing the combat fight phase at all. I think it's super important now to know how that all works with consolidates and how charging units always get to activate their pile-ins and stuff. Like there's a lot of movement.
We actually talked a lot about that in our Corn episode. If anybody actually listened to that one, we went in full detail where it's like, well, actually, if you want to go explaining the exact, like, say if we're playing World Leaders and you're activating, say, like some Berserkers and stuff, just to let people know that just in the consolidation move, how many inches can they actually gain from it?
Okay, so if a unit charged that turn, or so the fight phase activation is in engagement range. So when you're defining eligible units, if you're in engagement range or you made a charge move, that unit gets to activate. So if you charge with those Red Butchers, or in the case that we talked about, if they were already in combat with something, then they can make a pile and fight with that unit, and then they get a fight twice, so they get to make another pile and another consolidate. Which the consolidate is 6 inches, and then they can fight a third time and do the same thing because it lasts until the end of the phase. And so the part that gets missed is when they talk about what units you can actually swing on. That's only applicable on turns you charged. So in ongoing combat, if you're already in there and engaged with the unit when you make your activation, that unit can pile into another unit and consolidate because it's not their charge phase. So there's no longer that limit where they have to fight what they charged. And it's the same with heroic interventions. If you heroically intervene into me, I can now swing on you. So with armies that have these 6-inch consolidates and fight twice and stuff like that, if they're already in ongoing combat, there's actually a lot of extra movement you can squeeze out of that just because that unit didn't charge that turn. So it gets interesting. It's worth learning. Like I think, go through the rule book and really figure out how the whole fight phase works, because I'm not too familiar with how Justin's army operates, but I basically counter my Death Guard slowness with the fight phase by making, because you can only move 5 inches, but I can charge up to 12. That's a lot of extra movement. And then you can do the pile and consolidate. Now all of a sudden this unit that could only move 5 is halfway across the board because he got in, fought, killed something, and did consolidate afterwards. So
you just wrap around to the backside of them, gain a couple inches that way, and
or wipe the unit out. So and that was something in 8th that I think a lot of people coming over from 8th who played Guidelines and are now getting into 9th, they're now starting to realize how important it is to really master the fight phase, because it is very much a movement edition. And I would agree with Justin that the movement phase is pretty much going to make or break your games. And it's not just where you moved in that turn. It's where are they going and how are they going to get there throughout the course of the game. And then so throwing in a variable where you can potentially move between a 12-inch charge, a 3-inch pile, and a 3-inch consolidate, that's now 18 inches, obviously, limited to, if you're close to the unit, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of clauses. But 18 inches, being able to move another 18 inches on a unit that only moves 5 and kills like anything it touches, if you're not taking that movement, if you're not taking that pile and consolidate and risking those charges and stuff, then you're literally letting your army be slow, and you're just taking it to the chin. Like, don't do that.
And that's the thing, like, a lot of people are not familiarized with that, because, like, I'll be honest, like, I knew it could happen, but until we really talked about it in that last episode for Corn and stuff like that, it's like I finally like did the math as you were explaining it, and I was just like, holy crap. Like, because like I seen parts of it, but I never seen it as a whole. And I'm sure a lot of players that are either new, or again, if they've never played a melee army, like say if they just play Tau or they play just like a gunline type army, they've never engaged that way, so they wouldn't know exactly how to maximize the most out of the movement phase or like the charge phase and stuff like that.
Yeah, and even if you play a shooty army, it's important to learn this, because otherwise it's going to happen to you and you're just going to feel awful. You might feel like the person's cheating you or pulling a fast one and stuff, and it's really just because you don't know how the whole thing works. So you don't want to sit there. Just avoid that all. Just familiar yourself. Even if you're playing Tau, like, just realize, even when you get charged and your unit's still in combat, there's stuff you can do still. There's still movement that can happen, and you don't just always have to fall back and shoot. You can pile onto an objective, for example, or, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. Like, take that movement if it will help. It definitely, to me, is the best counter to playing Death Guard as a solo army is fight phase movement. What were you saying, Justin?
Well, from a kind of like the reverse perspective, because I played most gun lines, just knowing how the combat works, you can actually position yourself to defend against that kind of stuff too, by moving your guys, basing other, like putting base to base. You can stop them from doing those turns, and you can kind of hold them depending on how tough your army is.
Yeah.
But
I feel like
knowing the fight phase,
berserkers isn't going to go well.
No.
Well, no, but there's other things, like maybe the
depends on the unit. Like Crisis Flamer suits could probably burn most of them and kill the rest in combat and stuff. I wouldn't go. That seems like overstated slightly, but like as Justin's saying, I mean, to defend against it too, pre-measuring. How far can this unit go? 5 inches, and you have to be within 12. So if I stay at 17.1 inches, this unit cannot possibly interact with me on your turn, and I only need 18 inches to shoot. So that's where I'm going to stand. You know what I mean? So
that's what Justin did against me too. He measured everything out, so my demons couldn't get him first turn.
Pre-measuring is so essential to success, and I don't think that's just 9th edition. I think you should always be trying to think anyways, a turn or two ahead of where you are and your opponent's turn and what they're trying to do, and positioning yourself accordingly. And as Justin said, I mean, just knowing how to defend against it, just educating yourself so you can defend against it. Okay, he's in combat and you killed 3 models, so this guy, I'm just going to pull these models so this guy can't swing because he was already engaged.
Exactly.
Or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many things you can do, and I think
one thing when I was learning 8th, that was one thing that always annoyed me, is I'd always forget to use the flail guy in the Terminator squad or the Death Guard. Yeah. And I would murder whatever I touched, and they'd just pull away everything, so the flail guy couldn't hit. So,
yeah. And like I said, it's smart on their end. It's like you need to know what units to move, what like I said, the guys to take away. And like a lot of times too, it could be like, it's like, oh, your Melta guy's like, well, I don't want to take him off the board. But you taking that one Melta guy is going to save probably like 10 other guys, because like I said, you just avoided a flail attack.
Yeah. I think one of the best things about understanding the combat phase and defending against it is I find piling in onto objectives happens a lot, and is also avoidable a lot just based on what models you pull. So sometimes you got to say, oh, I'm going to pull the Power Fist guy because otherwise you're just going to get on this objective in my fight phase, and then when your turn comes around, you're going to score 5 more victory points. So, it's little losses and little things that add up over the course of a game, and learn the fight phase, like get it down.
No, I definitely find ninth edition as a total is, as weird as this may sound, but it's like a study edition. And I said it earlier, it's learn your phases. Like when I first got the rulebook, the first thing I did was I took 2 nights, I sat down, I reread the basic rules, because just in those basic rules is where you can find little things and you can do little things where it's like if somebody didn't actually go through it, read it, they weren't able to maximize, like I said, on the movement phase or the shooting phase, the combat phase. So it's definitely super important. Like I said, just take a night, sit down with the book, take your codex, take your secondaries, take anything at all, and just read. Take the time, write it out. Like I said earlier, it's make a cheat sheet. Write it down, have yourself a list, have each unit you're using, really write down what can they do, what is their purpose, what's the combos, what can they achieve in the movement phase, what can they achieve in the firing phase, combat phase. And it's definitely going to take you a long way.
Yeah. And also, going against new armies, even if you don't know what they do, you're not going to sit there and ask your opponent right off the get-go, like what does everything do in your list, but there are things you can think about with your list that you would like to know up front, like pre-game moves and stuff like that. Like, and does anything have a 6-inch heroic intervention? Just a few little things that you'll figure out to your list. But they say to become an expert you need 2 things: knowledge and experience. And I feel like ninth, there's a lot more knowledge you can take from it, rather than just like rolling with the punches.
Yeah. And kind of to roll in with what Keir is saying is like, don't be scared to ask your opponent. A lot of times people will be like, oh, I don't want to bother him asking him all these questions. It's like, well, no, like you said, if you've never played against this army, if you don't know what they can do, you've never seen battle reports with them, and you have no idea what they do, just ask them to do a little overview. Have yourself a little checklist. Again, I'm going back to saying, right, make a cheat sheet. Have predetermined questions that you would like to ask your opponent. Just like Keir said, it's like, which guys can do 6-inch heroic intervention, or rather than 3 inches? Which guys can actually get across the board? And like I said, when you're setting up, you can be like mindful of it, and then you can actually assess against it. So again, don't be scared to ask questions, especially in a friendly game, because that's when you're going to learn. Take your time. Don't rush yourselves.
Practice and help each other practice. If it's not a tournament or anything, you have no reason not to have this person getting better at the game and you getting better at the game. And I find that if you give it, people will give it back too.
There's so many times I'm teaching somebody to play a game, and I'm going to tell them how to counter exactly what I'm doing to destroy this unit so they know. Yeah. But again, I'm also going to learn how to counter that move by them actually doing it against me. And don't be an ass and like teach somebody how to play and you're not telling them all the little details and you're tabling them, because they're not going to want to play with you or even the game as a total. It's like, no, like Keir said, learn from each other, help each other out. You could be the best player at the club, but there's still certain things you don't know. Until you teach these people to be better, then they're going to test your skill.
I find if you're playing against people, sometimes it's helpful for them. They're so caught up in what they're doing and stuff that there's nothing wrong with telling your opponent, like, oh, by the way, if you move there, I can heroically intervene. It takes a lot of the salt out of the game, and like I said, I mean, if you do it for them, there's a good chance they'll do it back to you. And you might, even like you said, if you're an amazing player, you might overlook that, and then you'll be thankful that you told them, and then they told you, and you were like, okay, great, this didn't just like totally cost me the game. And again, with tournaments and GTs and stuff, there's a different mindset, and I don't really think we need to get into that, but like just practice friendly games and stuff, like help each other out. It's such a complex game that it doesn't make anyone feel good when you just like pull a fast one on them, and you know what I mean, like it's just like okay.
Yeah,
it helps shape the community too. Like your community will get better and it'll make you better in the long run too.
No,
like,
definitely.
Just to touch on what you guys are saying, but like Justin playing competitively against me helps me become more competitive.
Yeah,
but you don't want to take it too far as to take the guy out of the game. Like you don't want to completely dominate him. You want to help him get better.
Yeah, gotcha hammer isn't cool.
No, because like I said, it's like they're either gonna not want to play against you again because you're just being a complete jackass, or I've seen in some instances that people will actually step away from the game as a whole, just being like, well, this is not enjoyable. Why am I playing if all I'm just gonna do is get my ass handed to me because I don't know the rules and blah blah blah. And it's like it can be very demoralizing. And it's like I said, I have seen it happen in the past where people just didn't show up the next week because they're like, well, I sold my army. I just didn't feel like playing no more.
Yeah, yeah. You should be able to assess more or less, what level you and your opponent are on, and like I play Nick pretty regularly, and even he and I, like when we're just playing these practice games and stuff, there's no sense in like, haha, you walk right into my trap kind of stuff, because it doesn't. No one walks away feeling good from that,
No.
and it just doesn't help anything because
No.
you're not giving them the option to think about these things and how they would react, and a lot of the times you tell them about it, and most of the time they'll just be like, yeah, that's fine, I was aware,
Yeah.
and it was inevitable or whatever, but just the action of respecting that this person is trying to practice and get better too.
Mm-hmm.
I think growing the community, helping each other out, making and it's COVID's been happening for pretty much a year now, and a lot of people just haven't gotten in the games they want. So I mean, you're going to play people now, even a year into, about 9 months into ninth, who haven't even played a single game yet, and growing the community is so important, and
it gives you people to play.
gives you people to
Simple
play.
as that.
I mean, we could get into sportsmanship and stuff, but I just think if you're having a friendly practice game, then make sure it's just that.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's pretty much how I feel about ninth.
No, by the sounds of it, we're all pretty much on the same page, and even a lot of other people that I talk to have pretty much the same mindset of it. It's ninth edition is definitely a friendly edition. It's a fun edition. It's a learning edition.
It's an edition.
It is the fact that they made the tables a little bit smaller, this and that. You're getting engaged a lot faster.
One less turn. And
yeah, but not even just that. And it's just nice to see that these armies that never seen play are seeing play, and that is one of those things demons. I said at the beginning. But again, demons were one of those things were good, but it was you ran that one list and that was it. I find ninth edition is the edition where it's like you can experiment with stuff, and it not necessarily will be garbage. It will work because, like we've been mentioning since the beginning of the episode, it's not just a kill you game anymore. It's take your units, maximize what they can do, look at the board, look at your secondaries. Like I've been using models that have been sitting on my shelf for the last 5 years because they've never seen play. Because well, no, it's true. Like how many people back in the day would use the Court of Archon? When I'm playing and I'm doing my list right now, I have at least 3 of them in it because, like, how easy is it? You pop them in the webway, you drop them in the backfield, deploy scramblers. Literally, a 10-point model just got me my last scramblers in there. I got 15 victory points. Go kill it. I don't care. But in a previous edition, would I use a Lamian or whatever? Well, no. What are they going to do? They're going to poke you, and then they're going to die. So that's what I mean. So that's what I love about this edition. It's like you're bringing out models you've never used in like ages just because they're viable as long as you have a game plan for them.
Yeah. Utility isn't just how well something can kill something anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Bryan, where are you at with ninth?
Like I said, I enjoy the speed of it. Like that's why I've transitioned more into this faster armies like Dark Eldar and Demons. I enjoy the fact that I can run up the board turn 1 and be in your face, or just fly around and do my own thing and outrun you.
Yeah.
But at the same, with that speed, I can win the primary or the secondary game just because I'm fast. Like I enjoy playing these fast armies now. The Death Guard and being heavy and tanky and resilient was key in 8th because you just walk up center board, hold that midfield, and you were good. That's why I ran a Coven Heavy Drukari in 8th. Ran all my Prophets of the Flesh Talos and all that stuff and just held the midboard and fought off whatever came to fight me. That's how 8th played, and ninth, I enjoy playing those units that can move out. Like I've been running my Dark Techno Coven now instead of Prophets.
Mm.
I've been running the Cabal, the Witches, like I'm running Demonettes and Keepers now, which I've never ran before.
Because you also didn't own them before, so I'm just putting that
True,
out there.
I went heavy into it because of the speed.
No, it's true, and
I like
they're
these
definitely good
smaller
army.
tables. The fact that I can pretty much tag you with a Keeper turn one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to keep you busy, and that keeps you back and lets me do my thing.
Mm-hmm. Get you board control, and again, it all comes back to movement phase,
It's
board control, and
the same thing with the Drukhari. With the Drukhari, I have that speed with the Venoms and everything that I can get up in your face turn one and keep you busy while the rest of my army does everything else.
yeah, because even going back to Coven, like a lot of the list you're starting to see now is just racks. A lot of MSU racks, you pop them on objectives, you just hold it there while the rest of your Cabal, like you said, you fly circles around people, keep them busy.
Rack's got that big point decred. Like they went down to 8 points a model or something like that in the FAQ and up to 20-man size squads. But
Yeah,
20-man squads nice and profits, but I'd like to see what happens to that in the Codex. Why did they get cheaper?
yeah.
But
Well, like I said, we
still,
got
the
another 2
minimum
weeks for that.
squads right now, we can still abuse that profits of the flash for a 4-up invul, get the 6-up feel no pain,
Yeah.
and then 2 CP. We bring back 5-man if they survived. But
Yeah,
It seems more feasible right now in ninth than it did in eighth to outplay your opponent with a weaker army.
yeah,
no, it's true.
100%. That's kind of what I'm liking about it. Like, I don't feel like I have to go buy Custodes and a Castellan and a bunch of like guard to win games.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's
Play
true. Like I
whatever
said,
hell I want.
meta is not what it used to be. Obviously, meta is always going to be a thing. Don't get me wrong; it's always going to be a thing.
You still got
But
guys running out there with like Contemptors, and you got your Dreadnoughts still. You still see them. It's just not as often.
Yeah, no, you're going to see one faction be played 5 different ways rather than being only played 1, maybe 2 ways. And yeah, I'm loving it.
I'd like to. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Okay, yeah, it's just right now it's kind of early to tell what is meta and what isn't because we just haven't had the volume of games.
No.
Yeah.
So that's what's kind of nice. Well, I feel like it's kind of nice because
No,
it's still
it's
nothing
definitely
has been
nice.
settled.
Yep.
So nothing's been settled. People are still playing with the list. I think once the competitive scene starts picking up and like the more games start getting going, you're gonna see the narrowing.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I feel like it's going good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's even with that, even with the narrowing, if it happens, I still feel like everyone has a chance. Like you can still run pretty much any army and still have a chance to win this game.
Yep.
Yeah, narrowing is a broader term than ninth and eighth.
It's like
but,
Scary with Drukhari. He's been running Razorwing Flocks and stuff. Like those are not top tier units, but
But he
winning
knows how to use them.
competitive games with them.
Yeah.
He's written them in the list with the purpose. And just talking about, we've mentioned the word meta a lot. I'd just like to throw it out there for a lot of people. A lot of the times when stuff becomes meta, the concept is that it can win a GT, and that is not, unless you're actually willing to travel around North America and compete in GTs and or whatever, the UK, wherever you're listening from. What is meta isn't necessarily what you have to play to win RTTs, and you shouldn't feel forced into playing units because the internet recognizes them as bad. Because if you can find a purpose, and going back to that example with Sky with Razorwing Flocks, I mean he's put that in his list for a specific purpose, and he's looking at this unit saying, I mean, what are they, 30 points for 4 or something like that? Like I don't.
I think they're like 12 points a base or something.
Yeah,
like that.
and it's like 4 wounds or 3 wounds. So he's looking at it probably thinking, okay, this is going to go and score.
You're going to dump shots into it.
Yes,
you're
exactly.
You're going to either over commit to it or under commit.
Yeah.
But again, he's imagining these games against these top players and what they would do, and so even if you figure out that that's what it's going to do, unless you're one of these top players, you're probably going to miss the overall approach of the list, and there's potential for you to get outplayed. And that's important to remember, not to feel bad about yourself, but to remember that when these things become meta, it's the top players in the world planning to play against the other top players in the world to win GTs. Okay, and that, again, just to say it again, that is not the normal 40K. So you don't have to play these things. You don't have to go out and buy them to win your local RTTs and stuff like that. There's a lot more competitive options, and just because something doesn't say it's the best unit, it doesn't make it a bad unit. It can
No.
still be a good unit, and it can still fit your play style, and you can still write it into a list with a purpose. And its purpose doesn't just have to be to kill things.
No, exactly. No, I think that pretty much sums it up as a whole. So, altogether, as ninth as it is, 2 thumbs up from me.
Yeah, I'd give it 2 thumbs up too. I'm thoroughly enjoying this edition of the game.
You guys?
So I have a few things that bother me about ninth right now. But I mean, they're so particular that it's definitely a step up as far as the general rules go from eighth, as far as ambiguity and things go. The one thing that really does bother me is I mean, do we want to get into this, or are we trying to wrap it up? I guess I have to now.
Give your 2 cents. You started it.
Do, yeah, you
I
started.
guess-
People want to know. You got to
Okay,
admit. You got time.
something like a Keeper of Secrets is 16 wounds, and they talked about obscuring ruins being infinitely high, but still the line of sight is still true line of sight. And the only reason that bothers me is because they had an opportunity to completely rule out modeling for advantage, and they did not do it. And that's probably my
Yeah.
biggest beef with it is like you still have that issue where if your Custodes biker is sticking his spear straight out now, and
You can
he's
still
3
see
inches
it.
longer, and you can see the tip of the spear without drawing a line through the obscuring, you can shoot that unit. And I personally think, and I'm not, I'm not these people we just talked about by any stretch of the imagination, but I personally think it should be lines from bases as opposed to true line of sight from models.
Yeah,
Just to
because it
try
almost
to
makes you stop
stop.
making them look fancy. Like my
Yeah,
Venoms, I take the spears off just so you can't see them because they're
yes,
decoration.
and so the lamest example I can think of off the top of my head is Custodes bikers, where they have the option to have their spear straight up in the air
Or straight up.
and straight ahead. And in eighth, it was better to have their spear straight ahead so that you couldn't see them over top of things.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's better to have their spear pointing up because obscuring ruins are infinitely high, and if it's pointing forward, it makes the model longer.
It sticks out.
So it's literally you have to take that same model now and 90-degree their arm position. And I feel like they had an opportunity to stop that. Now maybe there's a whole power thing. Maybe it makes things like keepers too powerful if it's to their bases, right? Because a lot of times these big models stick out way past their bases,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously there's people who play test it, and I have to give them credit for what they do. I mean, they're the experts, not me. But that was the only thing where it's just like I still have to think about how I'm modeling my models to some degree. So that's my main.
That's
my
your one
main,
drawback. But if that's your biggest thing, it as a whole, I'm gonna say that it's pretty good.
Danny, I had way more problems with eighth. So
Yeah.
And yourself, Justin?
I think it's 2 thumbs up overall. It's pretty good. I don't have much complaints. There's
always going to be
some more
complaints of
deals.
some sorts. Like there's never going to be a perfect edition. But I guess at the end of the day, my 2 thumbs up are in comparison of like previous editions or stuff like that. Or
Oh, definitely, it's better than 8th.
They haven't succeeded at the statement they made where they wanted everyone to be playing the same version of 40K around the globe. They definitely have not succeeded at that. And the other main example I can think of is interacting with obscuring ruins. I know some people play it where you can tag the ruin and see through it, and other people play it where you have to be able to actually physically get part of your base within the ruin. And the rulebook specifically says decide with your opponent. So
I definitely get what you're saying there.
The frustration there is it makes it very difficult to practice for tournaments unless you actually specifically ask the TO how they're going to rule it.
Yeah.
And out of sympathy for the TOs at grand tournaments, I mean, God forbid 89 people send this dude a message. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's I think with that being said, it's definitely worth your time to reach out if you're planning to go to an event to the TO and get them thinking about it, and maybe they make a post describing exactly. I guess the big thing is what is within a ruin, right?
Exactly.
So, and
Have it so that it's stated so that everybody that's playing is playing by
is
that
practicing
rule.
properly.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's yeah. Okay, so that's two things now. Okay, we better wrap this up, dude. I mean, I'm sure Justin's seen the same things I've seen playing these games, but
Yeah.
you'll notice little things. And again, I think the ultimate takeaway is when you come across these things, just be a good sport about it. I mean, if you two have a disagreement and you have to roll off about it, just roll off about it.
Exactly. Like I
Otherwise,
said, you. Oh,
if
go
it's
ahead.
tournaments, check with your TO and figure
Yeah.
out what their ruling is going to be for it, so that you're practicing. If you're going to practice for a tournament, you're practicing the proper way.
Exactly. Because the takeaway of this is Warhammer is to make friends, enjoy your time, have fun. Don't make enemies. Don't be a complete dick to your opponents because nobody's going to want to play you. Nobody's going to want to interact with you. And it kills the fun. It does. Just enjoy it as a whole. If you like Ninth, enjoy it. If you don't take it away from the other people. Just have fun with it.
Also, if you don't like Ninth, let us know in the comments what you don't like about it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious.
Also, how much you're selling your army for.
That too.
Yeah.
Especially
Let
if
us
it's
know ahead of time. We're
demons or
looking to buy.
chaos.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
No,
Your
but
army
before-
as a
go ahead.
podcast we're missing out on. So if you
Yeah.
don't like Ninth, hit us up.
Exactly. But no, like I said, I'll finish the episode off on saying, and like I really want to focus on this, but if you guys are enjoying what we're talking about, like give the episodes a like. It lets us know that you're enjoying it. Add some comments to go to it. Like I said, like Keir said a couple things he didn't enjoy. Do you agree with him? Do you disagree? What are other things that you may find that you don't enjoy as much? And then we can start up a conversation. If you haven't already subscribed, do us a huge solid and subscribe. Like the more subscribers means the more people that we can reach out to. And while you're at it, in the comment section, or not the comment, in the description, we're going to have links up for our Discord. Our Discord's actually been taken off quite well. People are always in there chatting. We're having hobby nights. Come sit down, chat with us, paint with us. We can talk topics. We can even talk issues that's in the game, something that you want to figure out. We can definitely help you out and gives us ideas for future episodes because I want to start doing more stuff like this where we just kind of sit, give our opinions on states of the game or stuff like that that will get people more involved, get people talking in the comments section. And like I said, just grow the community. That's what Bolters and Heretics is here to grow the community, have people talking, meet new people, and just have a good time.
Oh, and also join our Discord and send us pictures of your armies. Like I love seeing other people's work. It gives you inspiration to push your army and get painting.
Yeah,
Is that-
we have a work in progress part of it. We have finished projects. We have faction breakdowns. Like I think Bryan set pretty much a sub faction for anything you can really think of. So, like I said, drop in any one of those lines, and people will be there to talk and compare pictures and just keep the chats going.
Yep.
All right. Well, pretty much.
Let's
Go
make the
ahead,
community.
exactly.
I was just gonna say, let's just make a community. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, first, I'm just going to say thank you guys for joining me on this episode. It was definitely a lot of fun to talk some Warhammer again.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a
Thanks
blast.
for having us.
All right. Well, to everybody listening, have yourselves a good night.